Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Andy Stott record, Faith in Strangers.
Andy Stott is a UK-based electronic music producer. This, I believe, is his third full-length album under this name. He has been releasing records since the mid-2000s, but it hasn't been until recently that his very minimal, atmospheric, textured, and moody approach to techno music has caught on through EPs like Stay Together and Pass Me By, and his full-length album that dropped in 2012, Luxury Problems. And I really dug the haunting melodies and the hypnotic rhythms off of this LP. And even though Andy was making techno music, I liked the fact that he came through with a very clear appreciation for ambient music too. Now, since the release of this record, Andy has remained relatively silent musically outside of a one-off collaboration with Miles Whitaker under the pseudonym Millie and Andrea, where together they not only made techno music, but they explored into other genres like juke and jungle. Songs with much peppier and busier beats than we are used to hearing from Andy, at least from his new stuff anyway. And now that Andy is going back to putting out solo material, I expected him to go back into dark, bleak territory with his music. And he does do that, but I think he continues to explore as well. In some ways, Andy's music on this record is darker, it's cloudier, it's more subterranean, but he continues to genre bend as well. With a few exceptions, the very driving, hypnotic rhythms of Luxury Problems are kind of melting away. Faith in Strangers is a slower, bassier record, sometimes a trippier record. It's like listening to Andy Stott as you've known him thus far on cough syrup. Take the intro track on this LP, for example. It really sets up the tone of the album. If you're not a patient music listener, if you're not someone who values atmosphere and mood over energy and viscera, you might be turned off by this track and just want to head back in the other direction. It's just a series of very slow-moving, bassy, kind of sludgy synth chords. They're beautiful, but they're very gargantuan and weighty too. It's like listening to just a monolith of sonic movement occur at a very molasses-like pace. Then comes the song Violence. I love this track. I love the very icy, burnt, fuzzy, and kind of distorted lead melody that plays throughout this song. There are these disembodied female vocals all over the track that sound kind of gorgeous, but also very eerie and just choked and held back a little bit. And the song seems influenced by dubstep music, and I'm not talking about Burial, though I do think the atmospheric vocals and just kind of the spaciousness of these productions will most definitely make people compare this to some of his recent EPs. I'm talking about contemporary, popular dubstep with the heavy bass, the noisy drops. In a way, this song reminds me of that, with its very slow pace and its just massive, distorted, subterranean tones. It's kind of like listening to a dubstep drop slowed down 500%, slathered in reverb, and then complemented with some kick drums that feel like they're being pulled out of the industrial music side of things. It's a real amalgamation of ideas, but it just sounds like one cohesive thing, and I love it. Then we get An Oath, an equally patient song, but stylistically, I feel like Andy is going in a little bit more of a down-tempo direction on this track, reminding me of Portishead during some moments. I like the instrumental. It's beautiful, it's ultra subtle, constantly progressing and ascending at just a snail's pace, and just with very, very minor tweaks as it goes along, although I'm not really sure if I love the vocals on this track as much as on the previous song. They don't really seem to carry the track quite as well, stay entertaining from the beginning to the end of the song. Andy goes a lot bolder in the middle of this LP with tracks like No Surrender, a track that features some really distorted synthesizer arpeggios and some really grimy sampled percussion and kick drums, though it is kind of a disjointed track that takes a while to get going. Then we get Science and Industry, which has the fastest rhythm. And even though Andy is showing that he has more variety on this record than he did on Luxury Problems, which was one of my main issues with that record, I'm not really sure I'm into these songs as anything more than just changes of pace in the track list of this album. There's not really all that much in terms of replayability for me in these songs. While I like Andy's really minimal and skeletal approach to producing music, the thing about that is there's really nothing to hide behind. So if nothing interesting is going on, pretty much everything that one of these songs has to offer is already out there right in front of you. There isn't that much to explore through. But even when the composition or the structure of one of these tracks isn't really doing that much for me, I still come through these songs loving the sound and the aesthetic, just the atmosphere around these tracks. Faith in Strangers is beautifully desolate. Then we get the song How It Was, which is maybe kind of a self-reference here. We see Andy going back to techno on this song, but with maybe a thicker layer of distortion than some of his fans may be used to, which might be a bit of a turnoff if you like his more ethereal material. The song feels aged and tattered and primal. It feels like an artifact that came from a very far away place, far in distance and in time. We have an ambient song that ends the record off. We get a bit of ambient techno too in the track list here, and the song Damage is a legit trap banger, even if it is kind of syrupy and slowed down and loaded with distortion. It's kind of like listening to an ultra bleak, stark version of a Tonight song, but the copious amounts of distortion compiled with Stott's trend towards simplicity doesn't really leave that much in terms of detail on this track. So if you want your banger here, just very simple and burnt to a crisp, that's what you're going to get. This album is almost an hour in length, but it feels so much shorter for some reason. And it's not a bad record. It's a decent follow-up to Luxury Problems. As I mentioned earlier, most definitely solves that issue of feeling one-dimensional. Andy explores a number of different genres on this record, and he finds that in the process of doing that, he can apply his reverb, he can apply his minimalism just about anywhere, and come through with a record that feels pretty cohesive. The issue is some of Andy's experiments into various genres work better than others. And when that happens, the tracks do get a little underwhelming. They don't really turn awful, but it does keep every moment of this record from feeling like a highlight. I'm feeling a decent to strong 7 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Andy Stott, dog barking, forever.